Hey, welcome everyone to Designing Products and Product Teams for a Global B2B Organization. My name is Noah Askin. I am an assistant professor of organizational behavior at INSEAD, of which I believe most or all of you have some strong connection. So welcome. In addition to teaching in the core MBA, OB2 for any former students that are here, or those of you feeling nostalgic for your time at INSEAD, I am also the director of the Product Management Executive Program. And so this is really a wonderful opportunity for me to get to dig into a topic that I've been teaching about for several years now, and to learn from not only an INSEAD alumni, but somebody who's quite well seasoned in the product world. To begin, what I would love to do is to get a bit of a sense of who is here in the audience. And so 2 quick polls to get a sense of kind of where you're coming from, and also your relevance, where product fits in your professional situation. So you can see that the first poll is up. Actually, they're both up at the same time. This looks like we have a pretty good distribution across people's careers and products, ranging from people curious to wanting to move into it, a decent percentage of you, to those of you that have spent several years and beyond, as well. In terms of where people are coming from or logging in from, about 65 from Europe, perhaps unsurprisingly, 10% from the US, Asia, 16% of you. That's pretty impressive considering what time it is there. Thank you for joining us. I guess unsurprisingly, nobody in New Zealand, Australia, because it's quite late. Great. So this gives us a nice breakdown, and that helps me get a sense of who's here today. And we'll also help Kitaki as we talk through her experience and her career progression, which is really where we're going to spend most of our time. So with that, let me introduce Kitaki. She is the Chief Product Officer at Appany. We're going to find out more about what exactly that is and what she does there, where she leads the evolution of the company's next generation of products. Her team is responsible for product discovery, roadmap, design, delivery, and enablement. She brings more than 20 years of experience developing products at small and large tech companies, including Salesforce, Amazon, Sun Microsystems, multiple startups, has worked in several verticals, including microprocessors, ebooks, mobile devices, mobile apps, DCO platforms, data management platforms, and customer data platforms, lots of platforms. Most recently, she led the launch of identity and consumer rights capabilities for the Salesforce customer data platform. Kitaki has academic credentials from 3 different continents, earning a bachelor's degree in electronics from Mangalore University in India, a master's degree in electrical engineering from Stanford in the US, and a master's degree, MBA, of course, from INSEAD. Welcome, Kitaki. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Noah. Thanks for having me here. So excited to be back with an INSEAD group.
Great. Great. So, nobody likes to particularly rattle off their CV. So I took care of the highlights for you. And, nothing like cramming 20 years of wonderful experience into 6 sentences. But anything that you want to add before we dive in?
No, I think you did a really wonderful job marketing me. I'm very happy to get started. Let's go dig in deep, and would love to hear questions from the people who have joined.
Great, wonderful. So I guess maybe to start with, and especially because we have a lot of people that are curious about product or just getting started, tell us a little bit about how you got started in product initially, and maybe what drew you in.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and I actually thought about it after you asked me the question. INSEAD was key for me getting into product. Before INSEAD, I was an engineer, so I'd worked in microprocessor design, creating chips for supercomputers. And after INSEAD, I saw the different functions that come together, the different business functions that come together to make a product. You need to collaborate across legal, people, engineering, of course, and many different divisions to really make a product come to life. And it fascinated me because coming from engineering, where you built the product and more or less handed it over, this was taking it the next step and making the product successful. So that's what drew me to it. And I was very lucky after INSEAD to get the opportunity to start my career at Amazon, working at that time on the Kindle division, which is ebooks at Amazon, so electronic books. Very early days. It was only available in the US when I started. So really was like a startup within Amazon, very high energy, lots of focus, lots of secret projects. So fun times.
Mhm. And so you have a background in engineering, you're electrical engineer. And you talked a lot about, this cross functionality, this importance of dealing with with people coming from all different areas. Did you feel like you had any skills specific training, or did you really seek out skills specific training for product beyond the engineering training that you had?
Engineering training did help. But that being said, in my career, I've seen many excellent product managers that do not have an engineering training. It's not about engineering training, but really about a product mindset. It's really about saying, I'm curious about how this thing works, or I'm interested in bringing something new to the market. And more than a skill, it's really like your inner interest. And if you have that inner interest, I find people acquire the skills. So you'll typically see people who are interested in product would have started something on the side. For example, I'd started a publishing company on the side. My dad used to write short stories after retirement. And so I published his short stories, like completely unrelated to what I did. But it was the curiosity of how does publishing work? How do you take a book that's written all the way through to printing it out? You'll see things like that in people's background. I actually always ask, what is your side gig? What have you done? And that I think that's the true skill set of product. It's not a degree um, or even like a particular job vocation that makes you a good product manager. It's that curiosity of how things work and how can I bring something new to life.
Mm-hmm. Can you say anything else about product mindset? And we'll dig into different aspects of that as we continue to discuss, but that's an interesting way to frame it. And I've heard people in product mention that before. Can you dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. The most key thing here, in addition to curiosity, of course, is that obsession for the customer. Like, you need to really put yourselves in the customer's shoe and not really be yourself as a customer. So that's one mistake people make, where they say, I'm creating ebooks, for example. I'm the consumer. What would I like? But that's not it. You really have to say, who is my customer? What do they want? Get the opportunities to get in front of customers, listen to them without any bias, without any confirmation bias. Just listen, absorb, and put those pieces together to find the opportunities. But that single-minded focus on customer, which I'm very lucky to have experienced in multiple different companies, I think is key to product mindset. So customer, what is the value you want to deliver to the customer? And now how do I bring it to life? It really needs to go through those stages. You don't want to just start with something and fit customer into it. You don't want to start with customer value and just stay in that stage, but really go from strategy all the way to execution, putting together pieces in the middle to make it work. So it's fascinating. And really, again, if you've done something on the side, a side gig, that's typically a good sign of a product mindset. Someone who's launched their own app or their own website, that's typically what will show up.
Got it. And so what of these things did you pick up, right? That mindset, and Amazon is sort of famous for customer centricity for sure. What are some of the things that you picked up right in that first job, and some of the things that you've had to develop more? I'm sure that they've all continued to develop the skills, but what were some of the things that kind of maybe came later on as well?
Sure. So I think, like you said, Amazon's known for customer obsession. And it is actually fascinating how everyone at Amazon, every engineer, every peer of mine, every executive, really, really focused on how would a change appear to the customer. There's one example that I vividly remember where we were launching a change to the website that was visible to the customer, and because the backend systems weren't ready, we had two options. We had the option to add a little bit more text for the customer, a little bit more pain. And the other option was to manually have engineers do like spreadsheets and cover for it. And we chose the latter because even adding that couple more lines that makes it confusing for the customer was not acceptable to us. So these really qualified engineers manually use spreadsheets and track the system for a couple of weeks to ensure that the customer didn't face any friction. And that, I think, was very key learning for me at Amazon, just how to approach everything from the mindset of how will a customer see this? How will someone who's not familiar with my product see this? Right? That's often a mistake we made. We're so deep in the product, we understand it really well, but you have to take a step back and say this other person is not sitting in the product all day. So what's intuitive to them? What will they think of it at first glance? I think that was key learning at Amazon. Also, really, something that I enjoyed at Amazon was thanks to INSEAD, I'd gotten exposure to different business divisions, so accounting, finance, marketing, and so on, which I didn't as an engineer. Right? As an engineer at Sun Microsystems, I worked with engineering. But with INSEAD, I got the basics from all these divisions. So I was able to practice that in my first role because my first ever project was about creating a new, it was about launching books in a new market. So launching books in the UK. And for that, I had to talk to lawyers to figure out what are the rules for pricing in the UK, what kind of business model can we apply. I had to talk to the people team because we had to have people in the UK. I had to talk to accounting to see how should Amazon account for these earnings. Should they be counted as commission? Should they be counted as a resale? And it was literally applying what I've learned right away. So that was also key learning at my first role at Amazon. You also asked about what I learned a little later.
And so some of the things so Amazon is a wonderful place to be exposed to product for sure. And I'm just wondering what other things stick out in your mind as insights that you gained or skills that developed from some of the subsequent roles that you've had.
Yeah, I think every place I have been to, I've learned something from that place. So Amazon was a great starting point with customer obsession. I was a pretty young product manager then, though, right? It was the first time I was ever doing product management. So really, I would say basics of product management is what I mastered at Amazon. My next big role was at a company called Jivox, which does dynamic content optimization, and that's really about changing creative in real time. So as you're looking at a website or looking at an ad, a different ad or a website shows up for you if based on what we know about you. And it was a small company, about 180 people at the time I was there. So operating at that level where you understood everything about the business, what I really learned there is how to present to customers. Because Amazon was B2C. So, I wasn't presenting to my customer. I was learning about them, but I wasn't presenting to them. Jivox was B2B, so business to business, and I was presenting to our customers really large names that we've all heard of. So learning how to take what we were building, but presenting in the right format based on who the audience was key learning at Jivox. After that, when I moved to Salesforce, it was about taking presentations to a whole new level. Salesforce, I had extensive training on how to present at Dreamforce, which is the annual conference. We would literally have trainers who would walk us through it. I had training on how to use stories to improve the power of my presentation. You'll see I use a lot of my hands and expressions. That's something I learned at Salesforce, actually. Use your hands and your face and your voice to truly convey your expressions. And now it's become a lot more natural. I have to hold my hands back, but it didn't start that way. So I thank Salesforce for that. And now at Appany, really learning how to present to a board that's made of tier 1 VCs like Sequoia Capital, Greycroft, IPG. I mean, this is a whole different type of learning. So every role I've had, I've looked for growth. I don't want to do the same thing I was doing before. That's helped.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that career trajectory. How much of it was opportunistic? How much of it was seeking out specific industries, roles, opportunities, growth? How did you think about your product career as you were navigating through it?
Yeah, someone at Salesforce, a female executive at Salesforce, she said this to me. She said whenever in her career she had tried to plan her career, it didn't work so well. But if she went with her natural instincts, like what she was naturally attracted to, that's when she found success. And that resonated so strongly with me because exactly the same. I started at Amazon because I loved books. I loved ebooks. I had loved publishing. And it was a dream job bringing together my experience in book publishing with my technology background to bring value to customers. When I look now at Appany, again, another dream job, just bringing together all my experiences in mobile apps at Amazon, my analytics and big data from Salesforce. It's a place where I feel my experiences help me be successful, but also a place where I feel I'm learning and growing in some way. Those two are key for me. I want to be in a place where I can be successful and where I will learn. And if you want to go even deeper, there is the Japanese concept of ikagai, which I strongly believe in. You want to find something that you love, something that the world needs, something you get paid for, something that you feel passionate about. So those coming together is key. And that's when you'll truly feel excited waking up every morning to do your job. You'll just feel it.
Yeah,
So
that's
I go by
wonderful.
intuition a lot more than this sounds good to do.
Well, it seems to have that gut following feeling seems to have served you pretty well. So I actually want to dig in a little bit to your current role, and we're starting to see a bunch of questions pop up, and where relevant, I'll try to work them in. But can you tell me? I have to confess, I did not know what Appany was before meeting you. Can you tell? I suspect that I'm not the only one who felt that way. Can you tell us a little bit about what is Appany? What does the company do? And then maybe we'll dig in a little bit more to your role there.
Absolutely. So Appany is the de facto for mobile performance standard. So if you have a mobile app in your company, someone in your company is likely using Appany. It's a very broad set of capabilities in a cloud-based platform that allows you to do things like competitive analysis. So if you're a United, you can compare your app to the Delta app. If you're a gaming company, you can see what new features were getting launched and how are they affecting popularity of games in your genre. So competitive analysis is a big use case. Strategic acquisitions is another big use case, finding other apps that have a high overlap or a low overlap with you as you're looking to expand your company. There's another use case where people also bring in their own data and now compare it to the rest of the market. Right? So I have an app, I'm seeing so many daily active users. What is the average daily active users for the market? Am I doing better or am I behind them? Things like that. So really about your app's performance. And this year, we've greatly simplified it with launching what we call the mobile performance score. So a single score that tells you the performance of your app. So you can now easily compare it with other apps. Appany is actually available for free. So anyone can go and sign up on our website and try it out. If you wait a couple of weeks, we're launching a new free experience, which will be even more powerful. But you're free to try it out. We also have a mobile app, of course, since we are the mobile app performance standard. And the mobile app gives you executive insights at your fingertips. So if you're following, let's say, the app Spotify, you'll be able to see that Spotify increased its revenues this week, that Spotify had added a new feature this week. Those are just extracted out as insights and popped into your app. So you have them at your fingertips. Many different ways people use us, but at the end of the day, it's about mobile performance. If you care about mobile app performance, you probably want to check out Appany.
And so you said the apps get a score, and a single score. That, I mean, performance can be based on so many different things. What is that? What's going, without revealing any sort of secret sauce, or maybe you can, what's going into that score?
No, absolutely. It's we want it to be the open standard, so it's not secret at all. It will be available on our website shortly as well. What we've done with the mobile performance score is there's two aspects. There's a standard score, which we determine, and we determine it based on your performance along 4 dimensions. So for an app's performance, what's key is how well do you acquire users? How well do you keep them engaged? How well do you monetize those users? And what is the overall sentiment about your app? Those are the 4 dimensions along which we measure you. And we measure you using different signals about the app. And then AI processes these signals to determine what your final score is. That being said, we realize there isn't a one size fits all. In certain scenarios, you may be more interested in acquisition, or you may be more interested in sentiment. And so we also enable the ability to create your own configurable score. So you can decide what metrics should be used, and a score will be determined based on that. And this is available for anyone to try. If you want to download the Appany mobile app, it's called Appany Pulse. You can try this out, find out what the score for your app is.
Great. And so you're the CPO here. What does that look like? What does that mean? So obviously this app and this company is going to touch lots of different companies, customers, potential users, potential industries. How does a CPO, you sit kind of in the middle of all of this. Can you give maybe a concrete example of a recent issue that you've run into that can sort of nicely encapsulate some of what you're doing, or some of the role that you play there?
Absolutely. First of all, I'm very thankful to have this opportunity. I feel like the luckiest person in the world to have this job, and you should feel that about your jobs too. A recent incident that comes to mind, and this is very close to me because I am also very passionate about consumer privacy. So the most recent incident related to that was the release of iOS 14.5, which was the Apple release dubbed 14.5, that introduced a number of privacy measures. So allowed customers to decide if they wanted an app to track them or not, allowed customers to decide what granularity of tracking they'd allowed, location privacy, and so on. Now, from the marketer's perspective, what it meant is people had the choice to turn off an identifier that tracks them across the ecosystem. So prior to 14.5, there was an identifier called IDFA that was shared by all mobile apps. So if Noah, your IDFA was 123, we could see 123, whether you were on Yelp or on Spotify, like it would be the same ID. And so we could connect your activities on these two apps. We could say Noah is listening to, what's your favorite music?
Let's say indie rock.
Okay, Noah was listening to top hits indie rock. And Noah also checked out concerts on Yelp. So we could tie that together and then figure out best ways to market to you. Now, by losing this ID, you are no longer able to find that connection. So we're no longer able to track Noah as he goes around doing his browsing across apps. Mm-hmm. Instead, every app has its own ID. So Noah is 123 on Yelp, and Noah is ABC on Spotify. Right? So it presents a whole different set of challenges to marketers. Further, there's this concept of attribution in marketing, where you're saying, I served an ad, and then the person did the action I wanted them to. And so now I can attribute this action to the ad that was shown to the person. So the ad helped that person convert. You lost that capability as well, because attribution now goes through Apple. So really, existential crisis for mobile marketers. And what we did at Appany is, even though it didn't impact our product directly, we work on aggregated data, not on user level data. We realized it's really impacting our customers. So it was really about putting on the customer lens and saying, what are the use cases that are impacted? User acquisition. I can no longer find Noah where he is. So what is a different way of doing user acquisition was one of them. And to that, we are working on a new product, which I can't share too much more about, other than it will not require identifiers, and still have the ability to find Noah at the place where he's likely to respond well to the ad. So it started with, what is the customer's pain, and can we understand more about it? But it also unveiled an opportunity, and it was bringing together different divisions at Appany. So I talked to many customers. I talked to our sales team. I talked to our product marketing team, and it was across all of these teams that we came up with this new approach. So one example of things that happen, when you're a company the size of Appany, we're about 500 people now. It's quite easy to reach out across different divisions as well. So it doesn't have to be a CPO. Anyone with the initiative can do it.
And we'll talk about team and cross-functional communication in just a minute. But so you alluded earlier to difference between B2B and B2C. And that's obviously coming into play here, right? Because now your users are going to be other businesses. So how do you think, and one of the questions that's popped up has been, when you look at customers for B2B and B2C, how do you think about the customers differently? And maybe how are you attuned to them differently when dealing with these two types of businesses?
It's a great question, and it's something that I learned along the way as I transitioned from Amazon to Jivox, Salesforce, and B2B companies. When you're creating products for B2C, you're thinking about a single person or maybe a household at most. So you're thinking about a person and what they need. So it's Noah on his device and he's doing something like what's the emotions running through his mind, what task is he's trying to accomplish. When you're thinking about a business, it's about the business goals. At the end of the day, it's about the business being successful. So, how can the business make more money? And for anyone who works at a business, making more money is not a simple task. There's many different aspects to it. So you find in B2B, there's many different stakeholders. There are influencers that will influence the decision of whether the product is used or not. Typically, the execs are very strong influencers. They need to feel there's strong value from what they're adopting. There are the actual people on the ground who use the tool itself. They are much more like the B2C case. What's the experience to them? What are they seeing on the screen? And then there will always be some detractors as well, people who are looking at alternate solutions or people who are skeptical about your solutions. So you have to keep this landscape in mind. And you have to keep in mind that you need to communicate differently to these different stakeholders. You need to articulate the business value and the how-to at the right place, at the right time. So it's a lot more sophisticated in communication and a lot more sophisticated in figuring out how to get to that business value compared to B2C. But it is also easier because you have direct contact with your customers. You can actually talk to your customer and say, what do you think? Which in B2C is a lot harder to do.
Got it. And actually a question that a number of people have asked, and it's a little bit orthogonal to where we are, but just where do you draw the line between product management and product marketing, right? You're talking about the different areas that you touch within the organization, and now having worked across multiple organizations, we're going to dig in next to kind of the human side of product and developing your product team. So this is maybe a nice transition a little bit. Where do you draw the line between product management and product marketing?
Yeah, it's excellent question. I think of it as product, and I think product is everything from strategy to execution. So you need people who can do product strategy, who can do competitive analysis, and that could be strategists or product marketers. And you need people who take like all of these learnings and synthesize it down into requirements. So what will we actually do? And those are product managers. Then you need a design team that will envision how this gets presented to customers. How many screens will we show? What's the flow they'll go through? What will be the elements you want to highlight or hide on a particular screen? So that's design. And then again, once the product is available, you want product marketers to figure out how to communicate it to different aspects of the company. To me, all of this is product. My team at Appany has all of these different functions. And we also have product operations. So, what are the tools we need? How can we measure that the product we delivered met its goals? That's also part of it. All of this is part of product. Product management versus product marketing specifically, which came up as a question, is product management is deciding what we want to build. Engineering should decide how we build it. Please, product managers, don't tell your engineers how to build it. They'll be very upset with you. Product marketing is about how do we want to talk about it. So my feature may be I added a button so I can download a file. But product marketing will talk about why would you want to download a file? When would you want to download a file? Not so much about click on this button, save as X or Y or Z to save the file. That's the difference. It's connecting the feature to the customer value. That's product marketing.
Got it. Okay. Maybe along lines to the point you just made about not telling your dev team. Somebody asked, what are the best practices in terms of dynamics? And now we're moving into the human side more here. Best practice in terms of dynamics between a product team and your development team.
Yeah, it's one of the passions I have because I started as a developer, so I see both sides. I think number one is respect, right? Like the mutual respect. You both have your areas of expertise, and it's important to acknowledge and recognize that. When I look at my engineering peers through the years, whether I was a product manager starting out in my career, or today where my peer is the head of engineering at Appany, we both respect each other's opinion. My peer respects that I understand the customer and the customer's point of view, and I respect that he knows the right way to build the product, like what's the right infrastructure he wants to use. Snowflake in case of Appany, what's the sequence of operations he wants to go through. That's his decision, and it does vary a little bit in some organizations. If you're a very heavily technical product, like if you're an API driven product, you may need to get a little closer because your customers will see the underlying infrastructure. But at the end of the day, you're collaborating. Losing that ego of, what's mine versus what's yours is key. You're in it together. Really, if you think of it that way, that we are building this product together and delivering it to add customer value, the actual line matters less. And both of you will feel free to ask each other questions to learn really about the opposite sides. So I would say best practices: respect your colleague, try to understand what they're doing, try to share with them what you're doing so they can understand what you do, and aim towards that common goal of customer value.
I wonder how much your background, so your background in engineering obviously benefits you greatly, right? You can speak their language, you understand. I wonder how much, if ever, it has actually also gotten you into trouble, right? Because you have this experience, you're like, I understand this stuff, I can do this. Has that ever come up, and how have you kind of stepped back from the precipice there?
It is something I have to constantly watch out for. Often I'll see people saying, especially if they reveal the next level of detail to me. So a lot of times, like, I'll get it done by this date and then I don't go deeper. But if you reveal the next level of detail, I will sometimes find I'll start asking questions about specific algorithms or sequence of operations. And most of the times I'm able to catch myself and pull myself back, or say it's about my understanding. It's not about me suggesting an option. It's just me curious and understanding. That typically goes okay. I think people are always happy to share what they do, but you do have to be very careful not to tell someone else what to do. Asking a question is nicer than telling someone. And the more you grow in your career, you'll find it won't just be engineering. It'll be other parts of the business too, because you would have experienced it in other companies. So sometimes with my sales team, for example, I have a question about why they're doing things a certain way because I've seen it done differently at Salesforce. You'll find that'll happen throughout. And it's, again, really about being collaborative and being partners, and phrasing it as a question versus framing it as a, you should do this, helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's almost the same level of curiosity and empathy towards your team as there is towards your user, right? Having to question and approach as opposed to dictate to something. That's in my exposure to product executive, that seems to be an interesting unifying characteristic of the ones that seem to be doing the best. And so I think related very much to this, and we're sort of skimming around the edges of this idea, is around communication. And it seems to be kind of underrated, maybe too strong, but it seems to be an underrated and underappreciated aspect of working in product. And how have you thought about this skill, and how have you perhaps developed it? Because you're now communicating with people with different incentives and different backgrounds and different areas of focus. And so how have you thought about your communication?
Yeah, communication can make or break someone in product. So it's one of the skills I evaluate as part of the interview process. And I break communication down into 3 types, right? There's a written communication, which you need to use at times to, share internally with engineering, sometimes share a brief with executives. There's the one-on-one communication, like you and I are having here, Noah, where I need to listen to you carefully and respond back to what you're saying versus just giving you my top of mind. And then there's the presentation, the big format where you're really doing a monologue, which I find personally the most difficult of the three. And it's different approaches to all three. And the content itself also needs to vary based on your audience. So I've found different companies have actually helped me. Amazon is famous for no presentations, so really honed my writing skills, writing internal press releases, writing 6-pagers, helps to distill your ideas. As you're writing, you're much more conscious about what you put down on paper if you know someone else is going to read it. So it truly forces a deep thought that a presentation doesn't. So even now at Appany, I'll often ask, if something is not coming through clearly, I'll often ask people to put together a internal press release. Like, let's just talk about how would we position this to customers? What would customers say about it? So it's very, very critical skill. It's not so much, again, people mistake this for, the fluency in the language. It's not so much about the words you use or the grammar as much as it is about the content. Like, are you bringing out the key points? Are you able to be succinct? Because it takes longer to create a short document than it takes to create a long document, as we all know. So writing is a key. Writing is also key because that's how product managers are putting down information for engineering. It's how product marketers are putting out information and content for prospects. It's how technical writers are putting down information on how to use the product. So it comes in handy in different roles. One-on-one communication is also very key. Like talking to a customer and listening to them. It's a very hard task. It sounds easy. It's actually really hard to be neutral and just listen to someone. So that's another key one. And then presentation, I mean, a whole different ballgame.
I like that you come at that from multiple angles, right? Communication is absolutely not one thing. In fact, it's multiple. And you said you're assessing it in the process. And I understand how that works, right? The one-on-one communication, you get a sense, you can ask people for writing, but are there specific things you're looking for? Or, how do you go about assessing that aside from kind of the obvious, just interactive means of doing so?
For one-on-one communication specifically?
Just in general, because if you're hiring for PM, you're looking for communication skills. How do you think about that? What are the things you're looking at?
Yeah, and I'm hiring for PM, designers, product marketers, and product operations. So all of those different roles. The skills are a little bit different, but I always ask for a writing sample. So I want to check the writing sample. One-on-one happens through a one-on-one, in these days, a Zoom call, but I'll assess it based on that. And then presentation, sometimes depending on the role, we'll also have a panel presentation where you present to a small group. So it's like a mock presentation, but I feel presentation skills can be learned. So I'm more forgiving about presentation skills. I feel the one-on-one skills is where people struggle the most. A lot of people, when they get nervous or, if they're not comfortable, will just talk. They'll fill the empty space. That silence is scary to people. And that's a lot harder to overcome. So I watch out for one-on-one. Can people say a sentence and stop?
I would do very poorly at a product interview, it seems.
You're doing great. You're letting me talk all the time. I'm feeling bad.
Based on that. So kind of related to these last couple of topics, one of the questions was, usually in a tech company, there's some sort of conflict between product, marketing and sales, right? The business side of things, and back on what's backlog priority, right? You see those Venn diagrams of like sales, dev, and product, or product sits in the middle, or, basically the product is trying to rein in all of these different groups. How do you approach these conflicts when the kind of superordinate goal is all the same, but there's disagreements about the means for getting there?
Yeah, there's different ways. So one way is to be data-driven, just use data to decide what's the best way to go. But actually what I've found most effective is what Appany does, which is creating a concept of a first team. So my first team is not my own org. My first team is my peer in sales, my peer in marketing, my peer in finance, accounting, and legal, because together we are deciding what's best for the company. And that makes it much more of a shared responsibility. So we find that we will disagree. We will have that discussion, sometimes a very heated discussion, but we all know we are on the same side of making the right decision for the customer. And so the disagreement happens more with me and my org than with me and my peer in sales or marketing. And it's actually a very different concept from most other companies. I'm finding it's working incredibly well. Most other companies, you're right, will have this tension between sales and product because everyone's representing their org. So in other companies, like I'm representing product and I'm an advocate for product. But really, that's not the right thing. You want to be an advocate for the customer. And when you think about customer, you're actually all on the same side.
That's a good way of thinking.
There's different ways of doing it. I found that what we're doing at Appany is probably the most successful.
It's interesting because I wonder how much of that is dictated or made easier by the focus of Appany versus other companies where there are multiple verticals and customers and different touch points. And I would imagine those battles become more challenging when you're starting to deal with, you know, really diverse product lines, really diverse customer bases, really, you know, if that's any different, or maybe I'm misassessing Appany and how you're focused there.
I don't think it should be different, Noah, because you know, at the end of the day, if you say my goal is the right thing for the customer and the right thing for the business and stakeholders, it doesn't matter if I'm representing the finance vertical versus the gaming vertical. There is like one place to get to that's right for the company. You know, and that may mean deprioritizing the gaming vertical while we invest in the finance vertical, but we all need to come at it together. So I'm not sure I agree. I think Appany, we have multiple verticals and multiple, how should I say this, multiple use jobs within the vertical as well. So we have the same challenges, maybe at a smaller scale than a Salesforce. But this first team concept is actually quite unusual, and it's the first time I've experienced it, and I found one of the most effective ways.
Yeah, and how does that either change your view of product? Like, how do you think about building a product team, generally speaking, right? So part of this, you know, I'm an OB professor. I care about organizational things, teams, human interaction, you know, that little stuff. But I'm curious as to how do you think about building and developing a product team?
Yeah, I really look for people who are collaborative and humble. I think ego is the thing in product that is the most dangerous thing. And I will admit, I suffered from this when I first started at Amazon. I just graduated from INSEAD, MBA from one of the best business schools in the world. I thought I knew everything. I thought I was going to be the next Jeff Bezos at Amazon. I literally did. And actually made me a very bad product manager because I wasn't listening. I thought I knew everything. I didn't ask people for their opinion. I didn't seek out collaborators and mentors. Really, number one thing is, are you humble and collaborative, and do you respect others? It sometimes comes with age and maturity, like it did for me. But that's, I feel, the number one thing when I look at hiring in the team. And then the second thing I look for is, what is your strength? Like, do you have a great eye for design, like my VP of design does? Like, he looks at a screen and he can change colors in the way to make it come alive. If that's your strength, if, you know, visual design is your strength, then do design, make that your passion. If, you know, talking to people and expressing the hidden value is a strength you have, product marketing may be your fit. If building things and like specifying things down at a detailed level, like when X happens, Y should be done, is your passion, then maybe product management is your thing. Like, you need to find what you do in your real life. Like, what do you spend most time on in your real life, and see if you can bring it into your job, because you'll be happy and the job will be much more satisfying for you, and you'll be much more successful too. That's kind of how I think about building the team. I do have specific roles I need filled, specific jobs I need done, but you need to have the strength to fill them in, but you also need the passion.
Yeah. So part of building a team is obviously leadership. And actually one of the questions is, what is your advice for a first 100 days or, a first relatively short time horizon as a CPO? How do you think about approaching that?
Yes, I'm very serious about planning out my first 90 days. There's actually an excellent book about what to do in your first 90 days that I read each time I start a new role in my life. Number one, a quick win. So immediately I'm scouring for a quick win. What can I do something that leverages my strengths or experiences from the past to immediately deliver value? So I'll give an example at Salesforce. When I started in my first week, there was a customer escalation from one of our Japanese customers. And while I didn't know the product, I was able to leverage my one-on-one communication skills to get on the call with not the customer, but the account manager for the customer and start laying out that collaborative plan so they could see what we were doing, start setting up a cadence so they were comfortable that we're addressing the issue. I mean, this was literally day 3 of my job at Salesforce. So I, just calming them down was a quick win. So I look for a quick win soon because it establishes credibility. In the first 30 days, I aim to learn. So it's really about listening to people. Unlike this webinar where I'm doing all the talking, I'm really just in listening mode. I'm seeking out different people at different levels to see what are the top issues, what are the things that are going well, just literally in that learn mode. The next 30 days is when I start to make some smaller changes. Right? So process changes are good at this time, making some efficiencies in process, starting the plan for the org itself. So Appany, it was about creating a new org, changing the org pretty significantly. So next 60 days was key for that. And then the final last 90 days, I try to make sure I talk to everyone in my org, which unfortunately I haven't hit thanks to the schedule we've had this year, but I do still aim to talk to everybody in my org because there are different viewpoints. But the last 30 days is when I really get into the rhythm. I know what my day-to-day is going to be and how am I going to get my inputs from my peers? How am I going to get inputs from my team? How am I going to communicate updates to my team? How am I going to communicate updates to my peers? Because at my level, it's really more communication. My job is really communicating and connecting the dots. Mm-hmm. But I strongly recommend that book. I forget who wrote it, but there's a book called First 90 Days, and it helps you plan out your first 30 days, then next 60, and so on, and it really helps me.
Along somewhat similar lines of planning, Frank asked, when is a product good enough to launch to market? How's that for a big question?
That's a big one. Yeah, it's actually a really tough question, Frank. Don't know if I have a great answer to that. I see for B2B products, one of the techniques I use is getting some feedback before launching it. So recently we had developed a new product at Appany, which we are very excited about. But before I launched it, I didn't just go launch it. I actually set up time with our internal team, our field team, the team that is customer success managers, account managers, people who know our customers. And just like, look at this product, tell us what you think, really coming in with zero bias. And we quickly got feedback on, not ready from certain aspects. So that's one quick way. Another way I do is I develop relationships with certain customers, so certain key customers. We have a customer advisory board as well, of which Matt Pilar, who's the head of strategy at Jam City, a big gaming company, is the chairman. So I'll often just run ideas by Matt. We'll just, I have a one-on-one with him periodically, and I'll just show the idea and say, what do you think? Because the danger is in our own world, we can become very sold on our internal ideas. So you want that neutral viewpoint. If you're getting overall good feedback, I think that helps you feel it's ready to launch from an idea perspective. Then, of course, you need to do the operational side, right? Like, is it reliable? Will it have the 99.99% uptime that I need? Is it passing all the quality bar? Does it have enough use cases that customers will be excited and it solves real business problems for them? We typically have a checklist. And every company will have a slightly different checklist, but you want to make sure it's ready from the checklist perspective. But really, then you just have to launch. I mean, you can only predict so much with software. So if you're seeing overall good signs, you launch, and most times you'll also develop that intuition as you get experienced in product. Yeah, sorry, I didn't have a good answer of it's ready to launch when A, B, and C. It's very hard to say.
I think that would be sort of miraculous if you had a very clear-cut checklist like that. But actually, also related to this, somebody was asking, how do you decide on, and this comes down to launching and determining features and thinking about backlogs and things like that, especially in B2B products. How do you just think about standardization versus customization, right? You talk a lot about listening to the customer, making sure you're meeting their needs. In B2B, especially where you're dealing with oftentimes fewer customers and they have bigger demands and you're talking directly to them. How do you think about standardization versus customization?
It's a very big challenge in B2B because you often have a very strong, powerful customer who will say, I want X, and then you're all scrambling to deliver X. What I've found as an approach that works is to, first of all, customize as little as possible. Once you customize, you're stuck in this never-ending loop of keeping up that customization. You've got a different branch that's living separately from your main branch, and you're making bug fixes to both. So it's just disaster. I try not to go there at all, if possible. Very, very rare circumstances have I done that. But really, when someone asks for something custom, it's about finding out what's their job. What are they really trying to do? They're asking you for a feature, but what is it that they want to do? I mean, are they trying to find new customers? Are they trying to get certain information exposed to them in a certain format? And if you can get to that root of what are you trying to do, you'll find you can come back to customers with a more generic option and say, I heard what you said, and we were thinking of building X or Y, and it has what you wanted, but it has more. And what do you think? And most customers are delighted to be co-innovators with you and help develop the next version of the product. So that's what I find is helpful. I don't believe in creating different versions of customized products. And if that's truly needed, I think services is a better way to do it than customizing the product itself.
Got it. I think that's a good, try as hard as possible not to do customization is an interesting, and it makes sense. We have a couple minutes. A couple minutes left. I've been pulling from the Q&A as we've been going. And actually there's a nice sort of symbiosis here in this question. So it's one of mine and it's also coming from Eric. I'll use his phraseology. He says, what advice would you give young Kitaki on her last day at INSEAD in 2009? And my version of the question, what advice would you give to people interested in moving into product? But I think I like the person-specific version of that Eric gave.
I like Eric's question too. Eric, I would tell her to be humble, collaborative, and seek out mentors. I think, coming out of INSEAD, I didn't know how much I had to learn. I felt like I knew engineering and INSEAD. Now I knew marketing and accounting and everything. But really, I didn't know it. I had an exposure to it. So I would advise her to be humble. I would advise her to learn as much as she can, seek out mentors in different parts of the company that she joins. And keep an open mind. I would really advise her to do that.
So you touched on an interesting thing there that I actually get asked about a lot, and I talk a lot about in my MBA course about mentors and mentorship. How and what I often get is, how do I even think about approaching this as an idea, as individuals? Like, how have you approached mentorship, both as somebody seeking mentors, and I'm sure now as somebody who serves as mentor to others?
Yeah, if you're lucky enough to be in a company that has an official mentorship program, definitely leverage that. So both Amazon and Salesforce had pretty large programs where you could get connected to a mentor directly. That's definitely a great way. I actually look, whenever I'm looking at a new opportunity in a different company, I look to see if my new boss can be my mentor. So at Appany, and every role I've been at, I've been very lucky. I've sought out people that I already can have a collaborative discussion with, and I know will give me constructive feedback. So at Appany, I report into the CEO, Ted Cran, and Ted has many years of experience in multiple software companies, including SAP, C3, and so on. And what I really like about Ted is he gives me feedback in the moment. So I'll finish a discussion with him in a meeting, and I'll immediately get a text with him saying, hey, you did this well for this part, maybe do X or Z next time. And it's because we have that open relationship, and he may not realize it, but he's my mentor, for better or worse. So it's sometimes just like in your own manager, and sometimes it's informal, right? Like if you tell people, I want you to be my mentor and dedicate X hours of your day, they may think about it. If you admire someone in the team, just going up to them and saying, I really like how you do X or Y or Z. Can you help me understand that? I love how you present to customers. How do you prepare for it? Can I shadow you on one of those things? That's a great, like, seek mentors for specific skills is one way I've approached it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I stole a concept from the former CPO of Netflix, Gib Biddle, who maybe you know because the Valley's not that big. And he has this idea of your personal board of directors, which I really like as thinking about this as a portfolio, not that you need to put all of your time and energy into one individual, but that you've got a handful of people who you admire and turn to for various things, depending on the skills you're trying to develop, the advice you're trying to get, and things like that. So I like that idea of spreading out the responsibility a little bit.
Yeah, and the time they have to allocate to you, that's a great way of looking at it. I don't know if I'm quite as organized as that.
Got it. So we just have a couple of minutes left. And so there's a lot of questions. Thank you to everybody. Obviously, we didn't have quite enough time. Hopefully, we've answered a lot of these. One that popped up, what would be your advice for a startup founder without a product background, having to balance your time between product and commercial activities?
Find a great partner who can work with you on this journey, because you really do need to do both. And you need a partner who's agile and can move to pivot quickly. Early startup, you're learning as you're talking to customers. So you want prototypes you can show them, but you also want to be able to change it quickly. I think I've tried doing a startup alone. It's the most miserable experience of my life. I think you need a strong partner. I actually quickly found a partner when I was trying to do my own startup, and having that partner where you can come back to in a safe zone and talk about your company is key emotionally, but it's also key that you can focus on building versus positioning and selling. So separating those out really helps.
Yeah, complementary skill sets. My last question, which I ask whenever I'm interviewing anyone, what question do you wish that I had asked you that I did not?
I wish you'd asked me if Appany is hiring, and they are. I'm hiring in my team for all kinds of product roles, and there's many openings in other parts of the organization. We are a global company, so it's US, EMEA, APAC. We have jobs all over the world, and check us out. Okay, so the question was whether or not Appany is hiring, and the answer is yes. So those of you that have stuck around to the end here, don't say I never did anything for you, or that Kitaki never did anything for you. Well, I suspect you'll get quite a bit of interest in that. Thank you so much for your time and your insight and your thoughtfulness today. I certainly learned a bunch and found it very valuable, and I'm pretty confident that everybody else here did today too. So thank you so much, Kitaki. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to connect with all of you, and really great questions. I look forward to seeing INSEAD resumes in my inbox soon. Good. Very good. All right, everyone. Thanks very much. Enjoy your evening, day, afternoon, whatever it might be, wherever you are. Take care. Thank you.